But when this little bit of money that we got is gone, what we gonna do? What we supposed to do to pay our bills?
Millions of U.S. workers are bracing to be laid off from their jobs again.
Right now, I'm trying to get a job at Papa John's to work during the day.
Delivering pizzas?
Delivering pizzas.
Tens of millions of Americans struggle to survive daily life in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic.
The number of unemployed Americans has more than doubled since the pandemic began, and some 55 million are now living in poverty. 8 million joining the ranks since May.
Time is running out for lawmakers locked in a stalemate over a new coronavirus stimulus package.
Nancy Pelosi at this moment does not want to do anything that's going to affect the election, and I think it will affect the election negatively for her.
When the president did his strange tweet that said we're walking away from the negotiations, it was like, what?
The Democrats have not been interested in reaching a deal, and until they do, we're at a stalemate.
So, Molly, let's get real. Is it at all likely Americans will see any relief before Election Day? Straight up.
They won't see it before Election Day, but it could pass before Election Day.
This is not a political game. It can't wait till after the election. Something has to happen now.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zak. Thank you for joining our CBSN special, A Nation in Need, a Stimulus Checklist. We've been following weeks of negotiations over the next relief bill, but as we chase the political debate, millions of Americans are suffering, struggling just to get by. The latest report from the Labor Department puts the unemployment rate at 7.9%. And as we'll show you in just a moment, some people have been laid off twice since the pandemic began. Tonight, we'll explore what's needed to keep the U.S. economy afloat and what everyday Americans seek from the next stimulus. Joining us now to help sort through what is really a complicated topic is Lisa Cook. She's a professor of economics at Michigan State University and a former senior economist at the President's Council of Economic Advisors. Professor Cook, welcome. So these stimulus packages involve billions, if not trillions of dollars. Can you help us explain how stimulus programs like this work and how the government can afford them?
They work in different ways. Obviously, if you're talking about packages, it really depends on what's being delivered in that package. If there are direct payments, federal payments in that package, or if there are benefits, extraordinary unemployment benefits in the package. But it seems to me that it is high time that we do something different, that we have automatic stabilizers that kick in when there is a decline in economic activity. And I think that's what should be done for the future, for the next pandemic or for the next recession. We need to have a lot more automatic stabilizers in place. So I think that that's the way they should work. Any kind of money that goes to the American public, to small businesses, I think that we should have something already in place, because this wrangling is just unconscionable for American households and American businesses that are sitting on the sidelines and suffering.
Mm-hmm. People are so frustrated hearing all of the politicians say, we know you need a stimulus, we know you need these programs, we just can't decide on the details. So if a stimulus program can provide an economic boost in the short term, talk to us a little bit about the long-term implications. Republicans argue that this could ultimately end up hurting taxpayers. Are they right?
Well, it depends on what's in the stimulus package. What I would suggest be in any stimulus package would be an investment in long-run growth. And I think that's the way, at least what I'm hearing from the Biden camp, that's the way they're thinking about their answer to this recession. But if we're not thinking about the long-term health of the country, if we're not thinking about investment in children, in parents, in households, in the elderly, in infrastructure, then we're not thinking about the country. And certainly, you're asking how could we afford it? I would ask another question. How could we afford that tax cut that we saw in 2017 that only benefited a small share of Americans and didn't trickle down to the rest of us? That was not an investment in long-run growth. That wound up being an investment in stock buybacks. So I think that there's another way to do things, something that is much more broad-based and something that will help more American households and more small businesses. And I think the risk of not helping the small businesses, for example, would be that some of our best innovation, newest innovation, comes from the smallest, newest firms. And if they didn't have access to PPP, and it would be likely that they didn't have relationships with large banks in place, then we've lost out on long-run economic growth, because that's where innovation goes into the long-run economic growth and raising our living standards. So I think if we're asking, can we afford it? The question is, can we afford not to do it? We're seeing women fall out of the labor force in numbers that we haven't seen recently. Since 1989, women's labor force participation is falling dramatically. We'll have a generation of children, if we don't take care of this virus and control the virus, we're going to see a generation of children who've lost out on education. And what about those who are marginal, or they're in the 7th grade and it's really hard to keep kids in certain grades? It's going to be devastating to not only those families, but to the economy to have students who have not achieved what they could have. And this could have been prevented by having a much more coordinated national strategy. So I think the right question is...
I was saying it's interesting hearing those arguments that we so often hear made on a humanitarian, appealing to us as a society to do better, being made from an economist perspective that is not merely helping people in the short term, but also the long-term economic health of our country is dependent on it. Which leads me to another question. As we're looking into this current economic situation, which many people have said is unprecedented, there still are some parallels to history. I'm wondering how this current situation and the government's response compares to the recession in the late 2000s.
I appreciate that question, and I am dismayed at the answer. Certainly when I was on the Obama-Biden transition team, I saw how our economy was being wrecked. And we got one stimulus package passed, and then we needed something that was much larger to help a vibrant, robust recovery, and we didn't get it. And we're seeing exactly the same thing now. We're embracing austerity when what we need is investment. And I can't believe that we didn't learn the lessons of 2008, 2009 of the Great Recession. So there are parallels, and they're stark. And I can't believe that we have such short memories that we can't remember how slow the recovery was. I mean, that's the real peril. If we have a recovery that is, a swoosh, elongated, that means that people are suffering. Those are numbers, but those are also people. They are families. They are farms. There are small businesses, people waiting on this kind of relief. So I'm ashamed to say that history is repeating itself, and it wasn't that long ago.
Well, Professor Cook, earlier COVID stimulus packages were sold as helping individuals and making investments in small businesses. Did those earlier packages actually accomplish what lawmakers had hoped?
They did to a certain extent. Certainly, the emergency stimulus embedded in unemployment benefits, that was a big boost for American workers and for American families. The checks that went out to individuals and to households that had certainly had an effect. For PPP, certainly there were a lot of small businesses that participated in it, and they stayed afloat, and that's a good thing. But as you know, many businesses have closed permanently. 60% of the restaurants, roughly 60% of the restaurants listed on Yelp, have closed permanently. So we are in a situation where these small businesses need more relief. There is more money sitting in the PPP waiting to be used. And those small businesses that didn't have access the first time around need to be targeted the second time around, and they don't need to be loans. They need to be grants so that these businesses stay alive. And they're not just businesses. These are often people's dreams. And due to no fault of their own, they are sitting on the sidelines, not being productive, not employing workers, not doing what they were meant to do with their resources. And they're certainly not being the pillars of the community that many small businesses are. So that could have been deployed better. I think in between now and the next crisis, we have to work on making sure that SBA and the Treasury can get out money faster to people. I think that absolutely has to be at the top of the list. And going back to automatic stabilizers, hopefully there won't have to be this kind of wrangling about a package, and a lot of it will be just automatic so that it's immediate. There's immediate relief to families, and it doesn't depend on political party. It doesn't depend on partisanship.
All right. Professor Lisa Cook, thank you.
Thank you.
New research shows that pandemic-related job losses are repeat layoffs. A survey conducted by the polling company Rewe found that out of an estimated 36 million Americans who returned to work after being laid off this year, 27% lost their jobs again at some point. For some people, being laid off a second time could affect their ability to qualify for unemployment benefits. CBS News' Irina Vona spoke to one woman who lost her job at Walt Disney World earlier this year to find out what this means for her future.
Recently, on September 29th, Disney announced that they will be laying off people. As a result, the part-timers in my department, which is the vacation planning, we have all been let go. So as of November 1, we will be we're laid off, which means we no longer work there, we no longer have insurance, and we no longer get our dream of finishing school. That was Disney's program. The Disney Aspire program was my last hope to finally finish my bachelor's, and that's distant right now. It's really sad. I think I'm more hurt about not being able to finish something than I am working, than I am because I am laid off. And I'll tell you why. There's an agreement, a recall agreement with Disney that they cannot hire any part-timers before they hire me. So that's okay until October 2022. I'm gonna be able to go back, but my school, between now and then, what happens? And I'm older now. So you create a bucket list, you wanna attempt to do all the things that you didn't do when you were younger. You have this great opportunity, and then life happens. What do? We're not asking for handouts. We're not asking, the working class people are the ones who really make this country, and the economy. We're the ones who sell and we buy and we take care and all of that. And we're just asking, this is a problem that is global. This is just not Florida or New York or California. This is a global problem. Hey guys that are in those chairs up there, take care of us. That's all we're asking. We're supposed to be the richest country in the world, and yet they can't take care of us, their own people, the Americans who salute the flag and love this country.
Coming up after the break, it's been a dizzying fight in Washington over the next round of stimulus talks. We're going to speak with our chief congressional correspondent, Nancy Cordes, about the very latest negotiations and how she's been covering the seemingly endless back and forth. You're watching a CBSN special, A Nation in Need, a stimulus checklist. We'll be right back. Senate Democrats blocked Republicans' attempt to pass a $500 billion coronavirus relief bill on Wednesday. The measure fell short of the 60 votes needed to advance on the Senate floor. The stalemate in the Senate extends months of gridlock on Capitol Hill as millions of Americans await more federal aid during an economic crisis. Democrats argued that the Republican proposal does not go far enough. It included funding for boosted unemployment benefits, $100 billion for reopening schools, and money for testing and vaccines. But it did not include several Democratic priorities, such as more money for the unemployment benefits, funding for state and local jurisdictions, and a second round of direct payments. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she has made progress with the White House on a much bigger package. She also acknowledged it might not be possible for Congress to finalize a bill ahead of the election. The president's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, said that they aim to have a deal in place before the end of the week.
I'm still very hopeful and very optimistic that we're making progress, and yet our Senate Republicans are starting to get to a point where they believe that she is not negotiating in a fair and equitable manner.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell warned the White House against making a stimulus deal ahead of the election. He claimed it could interfere with a vote to confirm Judge Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court and could force vulnerable Republican senators into a tight spot if forced to vote on a multi-trillion-dollar package. CBS News chief congressional correspondent Nancy Cordes spoke with Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell earlier this week about Republicans' $500 billion proposal.
Does your skinny bill contain another round of stimulus checks for all Americans?
No, it doesn't, but it does address an awful lot of things that we do agree on, and I don't think the fact that those checks are not a part of this package, as others have said, is a good argument for not doing what we are laying on the floor, most of which is completely without controversy.
And Nancy joins me now from the CBS News Bureau in Washington. Nancy, always great to have you. So why did Republicans choose not to include another round of stimulus checks in their proposal?
Because it's expensive. It cost about $250 billion the last time around. And this time they were really constrained by the fact that a lot of Senate Republicans just didn't want to do another huge $1 to $2 trillion spending package. They wanted to keep it at about $500 billion. And so those stimulus checks alone would have cost about half of what they wanted to spend. So they decided to jettison that from their package, which we now know did not pass in the Senate. It's the second time they've tried to do this. They weren't successful, mostly because Democrats blocked it. They really prefer the negotiation that's taking place between Speaker Pelosi and Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin. So there were some other things in this Republican bill, a bump in federal unemployment benefits again, about $300 a week, some money for schools, money for testing. But at the end of the day, it was only a quarter of the size of the deal that's being negotiated by Pelosi and Mnuchin, and Democrats are still holding out for that.
I want to dig into that a little bit more, but first, you spoke with North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer about where Americans stand when it comes to the price tag of a future stimulus bill. I want to play for our viewers that exchange.
3/4 of the American people in all the polls we've seen say they want a $2 trillion compromise. So are Senate Republicans out of step with everyday Americans?
No, I don't think so at all. Remember, the Senate is much like the Electoral College, is made up of 2 senators from every state. And I suspect most senators represent their state pretty effectively and pretty accurately. So no, I don't think that's the issue at all. I do think that we have a responsibility to look out for the future of, of our debt and of our deficits. And but like I said earlier, that ship sort of sailed with the CARES Act.
President Trump indicated that he's open to going as high as $2 trillion. You've spoken to other Senate Republicans about this. Is it likely, Nancy, that they could be persuaded to support a higher price tag if the White House and Democrats were to agree on it?
Some of them, yes. I mean, you saw that Senator Kramer there was kind of on the fence. I've talked to other Republicans who say they do feel that another big round of stimulus is needed, that the economy is just in a really precarious state right now. Too many people are suffering. But there are a lot of Senate Republicans who are sort of reverting to their fiscally conservative roots. And they're saying that if Congress spends this kind of money right now, that those chickens are just going to come back to roost down the pike, and that the American people will end up having to pay off this debt. So they really don't have a great desire to pass another huge stimulus bill. Now, what happens when that bill actually lands on the floor of the Senate and they have to decide whether to vote for or against a bill that is going to significantly help the people who live in their state? That is going to be a very difficult decision. And that is why you've seen Senate leader Mitch McConnell trying to torpedo this deal again and again. He knows that a lot of his Republican senators don't want to be put in this position at all of having to decide whether to vote for something that they really don't feel is the right thing to do. And that's why he's been kind of trying to gum up the works here.
So if Senate Republicans, specifically the leadership, Mitch McConnell, are actually the ones that are opposed to a big stimulus, why is President Trump saying that Pelosi, the Democratic leader over the House, is the problem?
Because Republicans broadly, both in Congress and at the White House, feel that she has been dragging out these negotiations for political reasons, because she wants to make it look like it was the president and Republicans who weren't willing to sort of seal the deal at the end of the day right before the election. Now, Speaker Pelosi argues no, she's just holding out for the best deal she can get for the American people, and that it's actually the White House and Senate Republicans who took months to come to the negotiating table. So there's a lot of blame to go around here. And there's also sort of a game of hot potato going on where no one wants to be the last one holding the bag before the election, sending that signal to voters, oh, it was us, it was Senate Republicans or House Democrats or the White House that didn't work hard enough, and therefore you didn't get your stimulus checks. So they're all arguing at this point that it is the other side that is the real problem here.
That hot potato analogy, I think, is a very helpful one in understanding what's going on in Congress right now, Nancy. All right. So if Leader McConnell is not really focused on getting this stimulus bill passed, what is he focusing on in these final 2 weeks before Election Day?
Well, he's focused primarily on getting Amy Coney Barrett confirmed to the Supreme Court. That's first and foremost. And he's also focused on getting his senators back to their home states as quickly as possible, because they need to campaign. There are a number of them who are locked in tough battles for re-election. He wants to cut them loose so that they can go home and campaign. Now, this notion that you can't do both is kind of a fallacy. The Senate could go ahead and confirm Amy Coney Barrett and then shift to passing a stimulus bill if it really wanted to. But I think that the situation here is going to be that even if Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin do hammer out these last remaining details, do figure out a big $2 trillion deal, that still all has to get put into legislative language. That takes several days. And then you've got to bring the entire House back to a vote. And then it takes days to work through the Senate process, multiple votes on the Senate side. So I think even if everyone were willing to do it, at this point, we are really running out of time. It's looking like if this is going to happen at all, it's going to happen after the election. And even Speaker Pelosi herself has started to signal that in what she's telling the public and telling her own members.
I know that she had set Tuesday as the deadline for negotiations with the White House, and obviously that didn't happen. So on a more personal level, I think it's very interesting that you are there at the Capitol. Before we let you go, Nancy, tell us a little bit about what it's been like covering this story in the Capitol, following the stimulus fight in the middle of an election during a pandemic. You've been a Capitol Hill reporter for such a long time. Share with us a little bit more about what this experience has been like.
You know, I think it's been really frustrating because while I'm used to witnessing gridlock on Capitol Hill, that's nothing new. We're in a situation now where lives and livelihoods are really at stake. People are getting sick, people are dying, people are losing their jobs, people are going hungry, they are falling behind on their rent, all of this through no fault of their own. And so you would hope in that situation that the two sides would kind of put their differences to the side and just sit down together and work through this. What do people need? Where can we make do the most good right now? And you really, by and large, haven't seen that happening. You've seen them talking past each other. Clearly, Democrats have wanted to do far more than Republicans, and that has prevented them even from negotiating it at times because they just felt that they couldn't get to some kind of agreement that both sides could live with. But that, it's really disappointing. We talked to some people who are unemployed who back in July when we spoke to them, they were really worried that perhaps these federal unemployment benefits that lapsed wouldn't be reinstated within the next couple of weeks and that they'd really be stretching to make ends meet. They never anticipated that it would be months later and they'd still be waiting for those unemployment benefits. And Speaker Pelosi says that she wants to make them retroactive, but there's no guarantee at this point that that's going to happen. And as I'll never forget what one lawmaker said, they said you can't eat retroactively. So for people out there who have been, eating one meal a day because they are trying to keep their kids fed and keep a roof over their heads, it's sort of cold comfort to know that they might get that money at some point down the pike.
Yeah, that really puts it into perspective. There's sort of a political sport when you're talking about the ideological, but when it's talking about the personal and real Americans who are struggling so much in the middle of a triple tragedy, to see lawmakers not willing to come together as a nation can be very disappointing. All right, Nancy Cordes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Earlier this year, CBS News spoke with a small business owner who applied for a $240,000 loan through the federal Paycheck Protection Program. At that time, Joe Walsh said the PPP loan was not ideal for his business, but he ended up reopening with help from the program. After some restructuring, he now says his business is more profitable than it was before the pandemic. And Joe joins me now. He's the owner of Green Clean Maine, an environmentally friendly cleaning service in Portland, Maine. Joe, it is good to have you with us. So, when the pandemic first hit, your company wasn't cleaning any homes. You had to lay off 34 out of your 35 workers. Explain for our viewers why you were at first skeptical about the Paycheck Protection Program and how things have since gone for you.
Well, the program as originally written would only allow you to count 8 weeks of payroll expenses to apply towards forgiveness. And if the loan wasn't forgiven, it would become a loan. And when your business is closed and there's zero revenue coming in, it's a little nerve-wracking thinking about taking on, $240,000 in debt. So that just wasn't going to work. And so I worked with a number of other small business owners to push for changes to allow that 8 weeks to become 24 weeks. And that ultimately was successful, that effort. And so we did get that forgiveness period changed, and it got extended to 24 weeks, which has helped tremendously. I know myself and many other businesses, both locally and around the country. So that's been excellent.
Well, in my interview with economist Lisa Cook, she argued that the stimulus is an investment in the future of our economy. I'm wondering, Joe, if you can tell us, did the Paycheck Protection Program keep your business alive?
It absolutely did. I mean, it gave us, first of all, it gave us the runway to open safely. It allowed me to know that I was going to be able to bring my employees back and actually pay them, because we didn't have any revenue coming in for 6 weeks. And it gave us the runway to open safely and take our time making sure that we were implementing all the COVID safety protocols that we needed to operate safely, and also to develop the training that we needed to get our employees prepared. And then finally, it allowed us to have that training and have that time to make that happen, but also pay the differential. So I was going to say there, we used some of the PPP funding to pay a differential so that the people who were coming back to work could make more than those who were sitting at home, having been laid off. With the additional $600 a week in federal unemployment that was being paid back when the crisis first happened, there was this sort of weird inverse economic incentive where people were making more money staying at home than they would be coming to work. And so we really had to be able to beat that in order to make it really fair for people to be working and putting themselves at risk during this. So the PPP allowed us to do that as well.
Well, demand for your services are back. You're still having some trouble, as you explain, hiring workers. Has that changed now because those unemployment benefits, those additional unemployment benefits have run out? And what else are you doing differently to try and attract people to work for you?
It really hasn't changed, Lana, and I'm not really sure why. And I was saying this the other day, that I don't know of any good data out there that could explain why we're seeing only about 1/10 of the applicant activity on open positions when we post them. So it used to be pre-pandemic, if we posted an open position with our company, we'd get an average of about 30 applicants per week. Well, now we're seeing about 3. Last week we had 2 applicants for our latest open position instead of 30, which we would have had before. And I can only tell you what I've heard just speaking to people who are applying and our employees. I think there's 2 major reasons. One is many people have pulled themselves out of the job market because of childcare. So in our area, the schools have gone to a hybrid model. So, you're in school part-time, your kids are in school part-time and they're home part-time, and you can't work remotely if you're cleaning houses. So if you're applying for a house cleaning job, you can't do that if you have to be home with your kids. So lack of childcare seems to be a pretty big issue that's holding things back. And then I think there's a safety and security and stability concern that employees share. They seem to be hesitant to change jobs right now. And if they are sitting out of the job market, they seem to be hesitant to come back into it out of fear of safety, but also out of fear of being laid off again. And that seems to be what we're hearing.
Yeah, so, we're certainly hearing that from people as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's making it really, that's our biggest challenge. I mean, I could be doing 50% more business if I could get the people to do the business. So, we joke that we're sort of like this exclusive nightclub now because we have a waiting list, which is, a little strange for a house cleaning company, but that's how we're operating at the moment. And we've turned to focus on retaining our current staff. So a lot of it is about figuring out how can you enhance the experience people are having so that they're most motivated to stay. So we've been working a lot on those types of things.
Well, it sounds like you're actually a success story in the middle of a really difficult economic time, in part because of this government action. I'm wondering if you can tell us how else you were able to restructure your business during the pandemic, and if you have any other advice to other small business owners who may be going through now what you went through before.
Well, when you're closed for 6 weeks and you're all of a sudden wondering, how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to, is this business going to survive? Something that you spend, I spent 13 years building this business, and so many business owners out there can relate to this story. Was really, really scary, but it also has a way of bringing everything into perspective. And if you look for the opportunity is there, and it is in some way freeing to realize that, everything's on the line. So in some ways, the fear of making change or the fear of switching things up kind of goes away because you don't really have a choice. And so, I really took it as an opportunity to pull my team in closer, and really just have some getting it all on the table conversations. What do we need to do to keep you guys here? And what can we do as a business to be stronger, and work together with a couple of other cleaning business owners around the country. And, having the help of colleagues who do the same kind of thing you do is also really beneficial. And so, we were able to make those structural changes and become a more profitable business. And I really do think it's a success story, which kind of feels weird to say, because back in April or May, I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to open again. And, we've been able to find efficiencies and change how we do things so that we're actually a much more profitable business, ending up netting about the same amount of money to the bottom line that we were before the pandemic, even though we're only doing about 2/3 the business. So, the way I look at it, we're going to emerge.
Joe, sorry to interrupt you. I'm wondering, though, if you are concerned. It's wonderful that you're doing well, but with coronavirus cases surging in many places across the country, if you're concerned about a second shutdown. And I'm also wondering, what's your message to lawmakers who are still struggling to make a deal on the stimulus?
I'm absolutely concerned about it. And part of my motivation for making the business fundamentals so strong is I didn't feel like I had a choice. We could have to shut down again at any time if there's a new surge in cases, and we have to be prepared for that. We have to be prepared for that structurally and financially. So I didn't feel like I had a choice there. So I definitely am concerned about that. And nothing is definite at the moment. And my message to lawmakers is that people need help. People need relief. I mean, I'm really grateful and happy that we've been able to find our success through this. But I have a lot of business owner friends who are not, who are still struggling. And we are going to see main streets with a lot of closed up shops all around the country if relief doesn't come soon. I have friends who own restaurants and friends who are in the entertainment business, and they are really struggling. And in a number of other businesses, hospitality and tourism related businesses. Hospitality and tourism is really big in Maine. I have a lot of friends in that business, and they're struggling as well. So a restaurant operating at 50% capacity cannot stay open for very long. That is not a sustainable business model. So relief is needed.
Joe, I'm curious if Republicans and Democrats actually do forge ahead with a deal, if there is another PPP loan program, would your business be applying for it?
My business would not. Like I said, we've changed the fundamentals substantially so that, and the initial round of PPP funding has, with the 24-week period that we could apply for forgiveness, has given us enough financial runway that we are going to be okay. Unless there is another shutdown that lasts for longer than 2 months, then we would need something like that. But we have now been classified as an essential business, so I don't foresee that becoming something we would need again at this point. But then again, we think we've learned we don't know for sure until it happens.
Wonderful to know that your business is now doing so well that you don't actually even need another stimulus. Joe Walsh, thank you for joining us, and
Thanks.
Thank you for keeping your part of the country safe and clean.
Thanks, Lana. I appreciate it.
And thank you all for watching A Nation in Need, a stimulus checklist. The conversation continues on CBSNews.com. And a reminder, you can download the free CBS News app on all of your devices, and you can watch CBSN anytime, anywhere, on any connected device. For now, a quick break. We've got the rest of your day's news up ahead. You're streaming CBSN.